Welcome to our webinar. We're going to wait a few more minutes and see if anyone else joins us. Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. My name is Windi Epperson. I am the Customer Account Manager here at Njevity. And if you can hear me, go ahead and raise your hand if you found the little icon in your navigation. Or in the navigation list that opens with GoToWebinar, you should have a chat section and a question section. So any of those options, just kind of let me know you can hear me before I start rolling through our slides. Perfect, thank you. Okay. So this is Dynamics GP SmartList tips and tricks. We're scheduled for an hour. I'm not sure we'll take the whole hour, but we'll get through all these tips and see where we stand. We'll have plenty of time for questions at the end. Our mission at Njevity is to improve the life and success of our partners and customers by providing exceptional business application experiences that simplify, inform, and delight. In that, we've added multiple features to our PowerGP Online product, and we are adding training all over the place. So we've started these Power Hours where we're going to be giving some free webinars, probably about once a month, just little tips and tricks for GP. And in addition to that, we've opened up a new training site. So at the end, I'll see if I can find our link for that, but you've got the ability to go out and do on-demand training on our training site, 30 days access to training videos per module. So that's something new we've added to help simplify, inform, and delight our customers. All right, today's agenda, I'm going to go through this fairly quickly from the agenda standpoint. We've got a slide for each of these, and then we'll go back and take a look at a demo of these things. So native objects versus favorites, we've got columns, searches, favorites and security, system defaults, the drill back functionality, printing, exporting, export solutions, letter writing assistant, and briefly we will touch on SmartList Designer. We won't go into that in too much detail. Okay, when you install GP, the SmartList get preloaded, and you'll notice over on this slide over here, how many of these have an asterisk out beside those? Those are native objects. Microsoft preloads SmartLists with some queries that they think you will be useful to you. If you click on any of those queries, or if you click directly on a file level folder, it will start loading. So this one, if you click on account transactions, it'll start loading account transactions. If you click on the star, it'll start loading the account transactions based on the default set for that one. Again, if I start clicking on any of these, and it'll show the queries at the bottom. But I tell you this just because it's better to not modify the ones with the stars. If you want to take this one and tweak it a bit, then you could do a save as, and we'll kind of look at how you can do that. Also, it helps you to know that this $50 one or this cash transactions with vendor, those are ones that we have created ourselves. So those are custom favorites that someone has created in the system. So if they stop working, we have to troubleshoot them. If these stop working, we could potentially reload them. So that's just the difference between the native objects, the one with the asterisks, and the favorites, the ones without. All right, Within columns, you have the ability to add or remove columns. Most people know that. As I go into click on columns at the top, once I've loaded a SmartList, I can click at columns on the top and we open this box. And in here, it'll have the default columns that we have. If I didn't want to include one of these columns, like say batch number, I could highlight it and choose to remove at the bottom. If I want to add more columns, I can do that as well. Click the add button and add columns. And then if I want to reorder these columns, I can click on the name of the column and move them up and down. You also, most people don't know, can change the display date. So as this field comes out of the table it's looking at, the field name is called TRX date, which is transaction date. But if I want that to actually say transaction date in my view, or if I'm going to maybe export this to Excel, I can hop over here to the display name and just change that. And we'll see all these things live in the demo. Okay. You also have in the columns, as you're adding columns, you have a couple of things. The first thing at the top is the find next. If I start typing, whoops, sorry about that. If I start typing a date in here, or just typing the word date in here and click find next, it'll scroll through all of the dates, all of the columns that have date in the name. And I could just keep clicking find next as I work through every column that has date in it to find the one I want. If I'm not finding the one I want, it might be because I'm looking at available columns versus all columns. So in this little bar across here, you have the drop down, and available columns are going to be showing the columns that are saved along with the default out of the box or in this favorite. So these are the ones that have been chosen. But if something that I want is not in there, I may need to choose all columns. One thing to note is if I choose all columns, I may see columns twice. So if I am, for example, looking at payables transactions, I might see vendor ID because the payables transaction, I might see vendor ID twice because the payables transaction query is looking at the vendor table and the payables transaction table. And each of those tables has vendor ID in it. So it'll tell you as you're looking through whether it's which vendor ID it is, but that if you see it twice, that's why, because the tables that are joined together to make this view or this query have some similar data, which is generally how they're linked anyhow. As you're selecting columns in here, you do have the ability to multi-select, and that works like it would in File Explorer or some of the other Windows products. If I click Shift and select one at the top and select one at the bottom, it will select everything in between for me. Or if I hold the Control key, I can cherry pick the columns. So I can multi-select in here. All right, search functionality. So again, once I've opened a SmartList, I've got the search button. And within the search, I have 4 parameters and multiple filters and field comparisons. So I can come in here and say, show me everything where the vendor ID contains ABC, or begins with, is between, is not equal to, is greater than, is less than. So those are all my filter options down the middle. If you are doing searches, using and you can, if it's possible, begins with, is less than, is greater than, pretty much any of the options for filters other than contains. Contains is the one that makes the search work the hardest and takes the longest. So if I have anything that is more specific, my searches will work faster and produce data more quickly. Okay, so I'm going to pick a column name, I'm going to put a filter on it, and then I'm going to add that value. So again, my vendor ID contains ABC. The benefit of having 4 search criteria is that I can keep looking if I don't know specifically, or if I want to do, maybe I want all of the transactions within a given date range for a given account and with a given distribution reference. So I can look at 3 different criteria. One thing that people miss a lot though down here is this search type of match all. So by default, when you open the search window, it's a match all, which means it's looking for this and this and this and this. Criteria 1 and criteria 2 and criteria 3 and criteria 4. But if you drop that down, you can actually choose match 1 or more. And if I choose match 1 or more in this search type, these become or criteria. So now we're looking for criteria 1 or criteria 2 or criteria 3 or criteria 4. And we'll see that at play in the demo here in a little bit. If I come in here and I start searching and I want to change it, I can hit clear all. It'll clear everything out up here for me without me having to do a whole lot of work. I can get to columns from this window as well. It works just like we just talked about in the other columns if I want to add columns to the query, or I can actually search for columns that are not in my query. And then lastly, we have I missed maximum records. There's a default setting that we will look at later that tells you how many records to find. Keep in mind that as I am searching for records, if I've got, say, a maximum of 1,000 out here, it's going to display the first 1,000 records it finds. Those maybe are not the newest, they may not be the oldest, they may be just however the system did the search. So you may not be getting all of the data. It's usually a pretty good idea to increase this maximum number of records per search. And then lastly, we have order by. Actually, not lastly, because I want to cover on this last screenshot I've got down here. And I've got another slide for order by. So let's talk about this one instead. This is at the top, you have this field comparison option. And if you choose that, you can actually tell it to compare fields. So in this case, I'm saying I want anything where the document date is not equal to the posting date. And the system is smart enough to know that if I pick a date field in the column, that it's only going to find matching date fields. Same if I pick amount fields. So text fields work a little differently here, but dates and amounts are pretty smart. And if I'm correct, my next slide is going to be this order by button. So let's see. Yes, it is. Okay, so when I click this order by button, I can actually sort this by numerous fields. So by default, when I pull up a query, I can click the column header at the top of the query and it'll sort by that field. But if I wanted to sort by one or more fields as a setting that is always used, I can come into that search and choose my order by. In this case, I want to order by account number and account description. And when I click OK and run that search, that's how my results will be returned. Now, if I go ahead and click on a column in the results, it will undo this order by. But if this is something I run on a regular basis and I didn't want to shoot this out to Excel and have it automatically sorted by more than one thing, this order by is a pretty good feature to have. All right, favorites. Now, as we've started doing our searches and honing in on our criteria, we may want to save those. Like I said, we may want this to be something that I go and pull up every month. So once I get the criteria set in my results box, then I can click this favorites button up at the top. And when I do, it's going to let me name that favorite. So in this case, I did it with the current financials. There's that asterisk there. This is where I would take that asterisk off to make one of my own that's not a native object. So I would name this current financial journal and maybe even add an S and take off the asterisk. As I'm setting these favorites, I have a choice as to whether they are visible to the system. So everybody in GP, if they're available only in this one company, if they're available to a specific user class, and that is only going to be any good if you are using the user class setup in security, which a lot of people don't use, but that is an option, or only to this user ID. So locking this down to only my user ID can be helpful, can keep people from changing it. But it also means it's not shared. So if it's something I need somebody else to run on a regular basis, I need to make sure to set this to be shared visible at the company system level or the company level, not at the user ID. Beyond that, if I want to put a password on it, then I can, which keeps somebody from changing my favorited SmartList. They have to have this password to be able to change it. That is, again, quite handy if you need, this is something that you're going to export on a recurring basis and you're going to depend on it for some reporting and you don't want somebody to change it, throw that password in there. So once I've populated all of this, I can click to add it as a favorite, which means it'll show up only in SmartList. If I add it as a favorite and a reminder, then it'll show on my home page in the reminders section over here. So that $50 one we were looking at earlier, that's showing me any transactions that are for $50. And this shows up as a reminder. Anytime a transaction gets posted for just $50, it'll show up in here. So I can go drill back into it and take a look at it. Within this favorite section, I could also remove a favorite. So if I no longer want to keep it, which is really good housekeeping thing, especially if you've got a favorite that isn't doing what you want it to do, come in here and remove it to clean house. or I could modify it. And if I have a password on it, I'm going to have to know that password to be able to modify the SmartList. Okay, so in the previous one, I said you could add it as a reminder to your home page. If I choose reminder, then I get an extra box that pops up. And so it's going to ask me, when do I want to be reminded of this? When I want the number of records is equal to 0, this probably would be more likely to be is greater than 0. So anytime I have a transaction that meets my criteria in my search and it's greater than 0, less than, or I can also do a total of a column versus a number of records. And display as queue just means, do I want it as a visual in that reminder window? Let me go back one. So in here, if you tell it queue, then it'll put a little icon out here. And depending on how big it is, like number of customers over credit limits is 7, it would be like a small stack of papers. Past due customer transactions at 1.9 million, that would be a big stack of papers. So it's just a visual cue to tell you kind of how big that is. But again, you could say, I wanted anytime the number of records equals or is greater than or is not equal to. We use this a lot when we have a clearing account and we want to know anytime that something hit the clearing account, we need to go clear it out. So anytime the number of records in our clearing account is greater than 0, we want to go ahead and see what that is. You could also use it for a column, like if I wanted to know anytime my bank balance is less than a certain amount, then I could use that as well. And those again would be reminders that pop up on my home page every time I go into GP. All right, I've mentioned a few times the defaults. So if you have access to this window, it's under Administration and Setup, and there is an option that is called SmartList Options. And when you open this, there's several things you can do in here. The first thing that you can do is you can change the go-tos. So in this case, if I pull up accounts, and that is just a normal, it's the same as if I went into SmartList, Financial, and hit accounts. So it's going to be, that's the list that is related to that. Right now, the default view is, the default go-to is a view. So it's going to go into accounts, into the account maintenance window. But I could drop this down and choose to go somewhere else from there if I wanted to. I haven't found a lot of good reasons why you would do that. Mostly this SmartList is built pretty intuitively and works really well, but just know that you could. Earlier, I mentioned also that the maximum number of records defaults to 1,000. I can change that. So in this window, for accounts, I can change that to be more than 1,000. The only catch to this is that you have to do it for each one of those. So if you want to change the maximum for account transactions, you need to pick account transactions from the list and change that one. If you want to change it for payables transactions, you need to pick it from the list and change that. It's not a bad idea to come and run through those and change them. The other thing I will say is that this list, as you drop it down, is not sorted very logically, so you may have to search a little bit for the category that you want. Okay, beyond that, out of the box, these are the default fields that show. So I could change those. If I always wanted, every time I looked at accounts, if I always wanted to include an alias or the main account segment, I could check those boxes, and every time anyone, so basically those native options, the ones with the asterisk, the one at the top where you just click directly on the account folder, where you click on the one that is only a star, that's what I'm changing if I change these. So I'm adding that, and when I change it for everyone. So again, I could add fields, I could move them up and down, I could take fields off if I wanted to. I could revert back to the default if I've made a bunch of changes and I don't like it. A good example of this, of a change that is a valid one in here, is when SmartList first came out, the native SmartList for account transactions showed the credits before the debits. So developers built it and they weren't thinking in an accounting brain set. And so we had a lot of customers who would come in here and alternate that so that debits showed before credits anytime anyone queried account transactions. They have since programmed that properly. So now it shows debits before credits by default, but that was a good example of coming in here and changing that. As we work on down, again, you could reset the defaults back to where they were. And I've got search default. So if I want to mark the match case box by default, so I'm always looking for, specifically capital W, lowercase I, I could set that. Most people don't because it makes it easier. It could speed up your queries a little bit if you knew the case the proper case of what you're searching for, but most people just leave it as not case sensitive. But you do have to enable the match case checkbox here to be able to use that. When they first started adding security around favorites, they put the password in here, so all favorites that you saved that you didn't want changed would have the same password, and anybody with access to this window would know what that password was. But then they added that functionality we've already looked at where you can put a password on each unique saved favorite. So that's a much better functionality than this one. But this one's here in case you need it. All right. So when you do a search, when I've got my search results in my box, and this you can see is just payables, transaction, invoices by vendor, you can double click on any one of these transactions and it's going to open that transaction for you. And that's because the first option of this go to is a view. But I could also, from that transaction, just click it to highlight it, click the go to, and choose any number of other queries as well. So a lot of people don't know you can drill back actually into the vendor instead of into the transaction, or into the vendor credit summary or the vendor yearly summary. So that's a great way to say, okay, for this payables invoice for this dollar amount, how does that play in the mix of what I've already spent with this vendor for the year? So just wanted to point that out. A lot of people don't know you can actually go to different things from those transactions. And the differences depend on the query that you run, whether you're looking at payables transactions or accounts or account transactions, et cetera. If I am going to do the same thing to this file every time I export it. So I'm going to grab a list of invoice lines, and every time I export that set of invoice lines, I'm going to run a macro that's going to do some slicing and dicing for that. Maybe it's going to figure out sorry, I just got a notice that my internet had flashed out on me, so I'm hoping you've been able to hear me this whole time. Maybe when I do export this list out, I want it to create a pivot table and a pie chart for me. So that's what I can do with this macro. I can export the data, build the macro, and then link it out here. And when I link it out here, then as I get ready to, oops, let me go back one. As I get ready to export, I would have, under this little Excel, I would have a little caret down here that would tell me I have an export solution for this one. And I could run that export solution instead of going directly out to Excel with this. I don't know if I have one of those set up in my demo world, so we will see. All right, we also have a letter writing assistant. So out of the box, Microsoft has created multiple letters. A lot of them are around employees. There's Cobra letters, there's hire letters, there's happy birthday letters, but there's a lot of customer related letters too. So a collection letter, a customer letter, depending on, again, which query you're in, you may have this little drop down caret. So if I'm going to export these to Word, I could do a quick export. It would shoot them out to Word and put them into a table for me. Or I could run it and create a collection letter. So I could do a query that said, show me everybody whose overdue balance is greater than $10,000. And then create a collection letter, and it would apply the results of that query to the letter and create letters for me that I could then either print or email or whatever I want to do with those. You can also create your own letters with letters. Sorry about that. I don't know where my internet went, but let me get connected back and I will do the demo for you. Or maybe I won't. Okay, I think I'm back. I'm going to lower your hand, and if you can hear me and see my GP, please let me know by raising your hand, sorry. Or you're off of mute, so if you want to just chime in out loud, feel free to. Okay, let's go ahead and take a look at some of those things. I'm hoping you can still hear me. Cheryl, if you're still there, will you raise your hand for me? Let me